Hi, this is Tasheena.
And this is Jonathan.
And this is We Watch What We Watch, a podcast where John and I come together and we chat about movies and TV.
Yep. In this case, choking with tears while holding back the emotion of our eightfold fence collapsing.
You know, I didn't do too bad in this episode with like choking up and getting emotion until there's one line towards the end where I'm just like, yeah, my fence completely fell.
Yeah, as I expected, this is the episode where it all starts hitting me, and I was just like every other scene choking up. So it's interesting, and I felt like this was the way when we first watched it too. Is the episode Crimson Sky really hit you, and I could tell like you audibly gasped at the end when you first watched it. Whereas me, it takes a while for things to like hit, but then the next episode, all the slow, sad music and everyone's showing emotion and all this stuff. They're talking about, and when you really start going like, oh wow, yeah, this is real. We are out of the state of shock. That's when it starts catching up with me.
When you're in the concuss zone.
Yeah.
Concussed and feeling guilty.
Chasing that catfish. All right. So this is episode 10, A Dream of a Dream. In the wake of a tragic death, Blackthorn finally considers the true nature of Toranaga's plan. It only also just hit me the title. We'll talk about, but the title is so like has a lot of layers there too.
I mean, we'll try to go beat by beat in the episode.
Yeah.
But we might be skipping a lot because I have like 2.5 pages of notes. Like this is a lot.
So in the previous episode, we ended with the explosion.
Yep.
Mariko put herself in front of the door. They used explosives. They blew it up, and she took the brunt of the blast.
Mm-hmm.
So we open with some kind of flash forward. It looks like we see, pretty well off, like English home.
Mm-hmm. There's some little Japanese items.
Yeah, there's like Japanese artifacts, some swords, a helmet, and there's these two kids talking. And some old person in a bed, who is very obviously Blackthorn in very bad old age makeup.
They did what they could.
Yeah, it's like, I can't think of the last show I watched that actually did what I felt like was actual convincing old age makeup. Like it seems really hard to do.
It's very rare.
You would think we would have it down by now, but I don't know.
So I don't judge too harshly with old age makeup. I'm just like, it is what it is.
Maybe it's just his brain's concoction of what he looks like when he's old.
I did like his eyes. I thought
they
did a good job where it looks like he's blind.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it got across like how the emotion, how he looks. I don't know.
Yeah, so he's ailing, lying in bed, and these kids are in here, and they're talking about grandfather D fought off all these savages, and he got all this stuff from Japan, blah, blah, blah. So it's like, okay, so you're thinking, okay, we're seeing his future as he's lying on his deathbed now, an old man thinking back on Mariko, because the key thing is in his hand, he's clutching the rosary that he got from Mariko. That's the rosary, right?
I'm guessing it's a rosary, yes.
Okay.
It has the cross, yes.
He has the cross that he got from Mariko when she was doing her protest, her seppuku, because she took it off.
And she gave it to him.
And gave it to him at that point. So he's holding that, and then smash cut back to present day, and John is being shaken awake by Yabu. Mm-hmm. We're back right after the explosion.
Yep. After Yabu shakes him awake, he stumbles over to Mariko and picks up her body and just starts praying to God over her.
And right before that, he's like in shock, and he lets out just like a guttural yell, which really hit me too. Just like that, when something is just so like shocking to you. And yeah, so then he starts praying.
And Yabu is in the corner really shaken up, and he says out loud, "Forgive me."
Yeah, he is shook. And
It's important to note for later.
Yeah.
I'm saying this out loud.
Yeah,
And
you could tell his scheming has finally caught up with him a bit in this moment. It went too far. As much as he was sort of a little shit and not as loyal as he could have been, looking out for himself, he I guess it just goes to show how Mariko was loved by everyone.
yeah, because he's like, she was only supposed to be captured.
Yeah, he did not intend for this to happen, but
Not at all.
that's called consequences. So,
Ooh, they came for him hard this episode. So we have credits, and we just get a little scene of Toranaga swimming and chilling.
Yep. Out in the lake, swimming around.
He's in the woods.
A little campfire.
Just kind of looking off into the distance. Just like a kind of serene moment.
Yeah. You can tell I think, yes, he knows at this point, because what that they talk about is that he has learned, about the death of his prized vassal, and in protest, he has fled Edo in secret.
So I'm guessing this is, where he fled to. Yeah.
His little cat.
Speaking of which, we're now in Osaka, where, bitch, everyone is leaving. Bye.
Yep. Yeah, all the hostages' families are peacing out.
Yeah, after what happened to Mariko, they have no power. They literally have no power over these people anymore. So we go to the Council of Regents. A lot of them are like, this was awful. What happened to Mariko in our castle?
Yeah, clearly Osaka's not as safe as we've led to believe. I'm like, what led you to believe at this point that it's safe? All sorts of shit's been happening in here, but this has been definitely the most brazen.
Yes. And then Cheekbones gives Ishido Toranaga's letter of protest, where he is...
And he does his little knee crab walk over. I just thought it was so funny, but it's also so cool.
And I could never do.
Yeah. So they're like sitting down, in their poses. And because I guess they're sitting, I'm guessing it's some sort of ritual thing, actual respect, where you don't get up, because Ishido's the only one's. Ishido's like at the head, and they're like facing him. So Ishido's in charge. So he like walks over to him, but not gets up and walks. That would be too awkward and disrupt the flow, right? To get up, go get something, sit down. So you got to walk over. How do you walk over while sitting? Well, if you're sitting like cross-legged, you just walk with your knees.
Because it's not like he's not crawling. So it's like, so he's not going above Ishido, but he's not doing something that would look like he's groveling or like belittling himself.
Yeah, he's still sitting straight up, just walking. It was one of those things that just looks like it should be so awkward, but he does it with so much style that it just blows your mind.
So Cheekbones had a good last moment before lost himself. So as you said, the letter of protest says, since my prized vassal died in Osaka, I don't feel safe anymore to surrender, so I'm leaving.
And
Bye.
Preparing for war.
Yes, and that is the important part. He's preparing for war. So there's a lot of back and forth going on. For Ishido, the big thing is that as long as the Council of Regents are united and they are under the heir's banner, they're good. They're golden.
Yeah. He makes their cause lawful.
But there's little things in here that you see the cracks. Like, is it Ono?
Ono, yep.
Who I feel like he legit is a Christian.
Yes.
Because he is concerned about Mariko getting a Christian burial. And Kiyama agrees with them, but probably not as strong.
Yeah, we've had Kiyama openly saying, I don't really care about the faith, I'm just here for trade.
Yeah.
But Ono, I'm guessing
like
because of his leprosy, that it was described as it drove him into the arms of the church. Yeah, I think he has legit faith experience there.
So they're arguing for that, and Ishido kind of disses Mariko. Like, why did she deserve that? Her bloodline killed Lady Ochiba's father.
Yeah, you can tell he's trying to appeal to her. He killed your dad.
Yeah. And she's like, nah, she should have an honorable death. Burial. Yeah. And
Lady Mariko will generously be honored. She looks right at him.
The look on Ishido's face, because he was doing it as we're together on this. And when she breaks away from him, Yoshida, you could see like that little idea of a crack is in his mind. But he's like, no, I'll just push it aside. You know,
it reminded me of the comment he made about Tornaga's sons. Well, he has others. Well, who cares about Mariko? Like he's missing.
He's missing the fact that they are so close. Like, he's just missing pieces. It's interesting. So he's like, oh, okay, we'll go to war after this burial.
Funeral first, war later. War later. Pencil it in your calendars.
And then, they mention, the Christian regents mention, well, what about the heretic? Is she just like, after we vote, I don't care. Do whatever the fuck you want with him. She is so over Johnny. They're like, I don't care. So he's getting his little pen ready.
And so what they say here is, he says, war is inevitable. And then they all repeat inevitable. And he starts writing. And that is the vote.
Yes.
And so when they would have these war councils, that's how they would call for the vote. They would say it was a specific phrase, and it basically literally translated to war is inevitable. And everyone would voice their support for it by saying war is inevitable. And then that was the vote. So they vote basically all, yes, we're going to war.
Wonder what you would say if you were in disagreement. Nah.
Apparently these would get pretty heated. And generally speaking, nothing could be done without the agreement of council. Everyone had their councils, and they would do these votes. And so there were lords who lost like everything because their council couldn't decide what to do, so they just had to surrender. It's like, wow.
I mean, the bickering we've seen with this council, it's not hard to believe.
And I think that's an important thing to understand this whole show with the council. It always feels like, it can kind of feel like, why are you even bothering with this council? Like, this seems like such a ineffective organization. Like, but this way of doing politics is very rooted in their history and their culture, and how they come to agreements is these councils, these vote. Everyone has to agree. Like, this is a very important process.
After seeing our political system, I don't think we have any room to judge anybody else's political system.
Right.
And then, as he's writing down, I guess, the vote or declaration, whatever, we get a little earthquake. Yep. Which, awful timing for Yoshida. Oh, man.
So then Kiyama's like, maybe this matter requires a bit more debate. And Yoshida's just like,
pissed.
Shut the fuck up. Stop the superstition. We are not peasants digging in the dirt for meeting. We are protectors of the realm. I am the king. And he's getting very like...
Oh, he's getting heated.
He's getting heated. He's getting a little like... You can tell he's like... He feels like he's on the cusp of a victory, but one that he really didn't earn, and a journey of great frustration for him. You can tell he's getting tired of all this back and forth. He just wants to... He almost comes across a little bit unhinged.
Yes.
And I think that's also another thing that's alienating himself from everyone else, is he's starting to lose his that classic Ishido composure. You know, it's starting, the cracks are starting to show a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So he says the vote is done. And apparently this earthquake is also based off real events. This actually happened with some of the, characters this is based on, because a lot of them were very superstitious and were looking for meaning. All these things, and earthquakes were a very common source of that. And there was an instance once where, there was an earthquake during a war council, and so someone took it as a bad omen, so he just jumped on a horse and fled as fast as he possibly could go. Crazy stuff.
Now, next we go to poor Yabu, who I'm truly, he looks concussed.
Yeah.
And guilt-ridden, so it's like the combo of the two is not good.
Yep. And his hearing is shot, and he just looks
rough. Ishido comes up to him. I didn't write exactly what he said, just more, pretty much, Yabu's finally getting what he wants. Yoshida's like, you're going to be rewarded for helping us. We're going to get the victory. You're going to get that seat on the council. And Yabu's just looking off. He just not there. Which is so weird. Like, yeah, this is the moment. This is like supposed to be his moment.
Yep.
He finally won Ishido over. He's finally going to get what he's been striving for, like this whole season. And this is where he goes into the earthquake.
Yeah, he talks about how when I guess the Taiko at some point was going to go to war against Toranaga, apparently, which...
Interesting side note, yeah.
But an earthquake hit during council. This is
like
the story of the earthquake is the one that's based off a real event and was based off the real guy that Taiko was based on.
Okay.
Yeah, so this like basically actually happened, and so all his allies saw it as a bad omen. So then the resolve broke apart, and he was forced to sue for peace.
Yep. And Yabu jumps into the pond and is trying to find a catfish because I guess the Taiko believed that a cat, like the tail of a catfish is what like hit the earth and like caused the earthquake. So he was trying to go after this catfish.
Because for those who don't know, catfish are huge.
Yes. So Yabu is just like, he looks completely unhinged trying to find this catfish in this little pond. And it's just like, Yabushige, there's no catfish in that pond.
And so you're just like, this story is really hitting you that how far gone Yabu is, and it's hitting Ishido too. He looks very, very disturbed.
Yes.
And this you definitely start to feel a bit for Yabu in this moment.
Like Ishido just kind of does the slow back into the trees type of meme, and he's like, "Okay, well, return to Izu, get your men ready and for war." And I'll see you later. Bye. And he's just like looking at him as he's leaving. You could tell he very put off by this.
Yep. And it makes you wonder, like, and Ishido's probably thinking, I wonder how useful this guy's actually going to be in this state. But nope, got to forge ahead. He's so close to victory, he thinks.
Yeah, it's just another one of those cracks that Ishido is just like, nah. I'm just like, I got things to do. I got a war to win.
Yep.
And after this, we have a little scene of Toranaga where he lets his falcon go.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what this symbolizes. Maybe that its job is done, it's fulfilled its duty. I don't know. But he says to it, bear many daughters.
I thought that was interesting.
Which is a really
sons.
sweet line.
Yeah.
And he says he's sort of choking up a little bit as he says it too.
Yes, you could tell he's thinking about Mariko as he's letting the falcon go. I guess makes sense. Yeah, if the job is done, it's Mariko who got it done.
We go back to our flash forward with John.
Yes.
Still in his bed. Kids are asking him a bunch of annoying questions.
They're like 8 or 10, so yeah, the shitty questions make sense.
Little shitty, snooty, rich kids turning them all savages. All right, and then snaps back into present day again, and we have John's waking up in a bed somewhere because he got hit pretty bad on the head, and so he's been like out of it.
Yes. And they also mentioned that Mariko's funeral was the day before.
Yeah.
So he missed it.
It's an interesting thing that we don't see, because we don't see it either. We don't see the funeral. It's done off screen, which I think puts you kind of in John's position too, where like, yeah, like,
she's just gone.
You're still in shock.
Yeah. She hasn't gotten any like closure yet.
Yeah, the closure has been denied us. So he gets up and they tell him that Lord Kiyama's men will escort him to the harbor, which of course we all know what that means, and John knows
going through the bandit woods, man.
All right. He meets them out in the courtyard and he's just like, well, get over with then.
And then who arrives?
I don't know. Who arrives?
The priest. Whatever his name is. I heard it in the podcast, and I still don't know how to pronounce it.
Is it just... Are we getting hung up on like his first name or something? Is his name just like Martine or something?
It's like Alvita, something like that.
I thought it started with a T.
Well, that's his nickname. Yeah, like Tisu or something like that.
Oh, is that his nickname?
That's a nickname that they've given him.
Oh.
His real name starts with A, like Alvita. And they said it in the podcast. I'm like, oh, that's his name? And I totally forgot.
Martine Alvito.
Alvito.
Isn't it Martin? Isn't that how you pronounce it? Martin?
Sure.
Sounds
Sounds
exotic.
correct.
Sounds Portuguese. Other than Martin. Alvito.
Martin.
Yeah, he looks very different without the bowl cut or whatever.
Oh man, I'm gonna have to look this up. Whoa!
Yeah.
Holy shit, he's hot.
Yeah. Just got just an awful haircut.
Awful haircut.
Church ain't doing nobody no favors.
They had to do awful haircuts
Alvito.
so women would not go near them.
Yeah. Your promise to chastity. Well, and we're gonna cut your hair to make sure it stays that way. All right. So he shows up and is like, yeah, we're here to escort you to the bay. Yabu's already there preparing the galley to head back to Tornaga because you've been allowed to return.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but he's going through those woods, so he's definitely side-eyeing this whole situation.
Yeah. So they're walking through the woods, and he sort of sits down, takes a break. They talk about how all the families have been released from Osaka. So, and now it's interesting. John has had a complete 180. Now that he's really like seen Tornaga's plan and understands it, he's just like, no, Tornaga's not going to be surrendering. And the priest is like, no, not yet. But he's
it's inevitable.
It's inevitable because the council's still united against him. But John's like, nope. You don't know Tornaga.
Know him. You don't know him like I do now.
John's journey has gone all the way back. He's now full on Tornaga stan. It's like, nope.
Yep.
I doubted before, but I'm all on board the Tornaga train.
Choo choo. And then it leads into, I think because he mentions that he sent Marco to do this job.
Because he's like, he got just what he wanted. All the hostages are free. There's no more
hands clean.
Yep. Yeah, his hands are clean.
It just
no dirty hands, no war, just a woman.
Yep. And then he talks to the priest about praying over her. He's like, not to your God, not to my God, just to God. And just talking a lot about the differences between them and the whole Protestant versus Catholic thing.
Yeah. The priest says, I think it would have pleased her to see us being civil, and perhaps there may come a time where we can set aside our differences. So these definitely seem like people, like maybe in another life, they could have been like close.
Yes. Because as he's saying some of the stuff, he's like looking around in the woods, like this far off look. I'm like, oh my God, is he still concussed? Like,
I think he was literally looking for the archers in the hills. So he's just like,
he just has this odd expression throughout the whole episode. He's very different. And this is like the beginning of seeing like how much this event changed him.
And changed the show, because this is something I want to talk about too. Like, this whole episode feels like it's a dream. The entire tone has changed since just the previous episode. All this like tension that is built up is like gone in a moment. It's all very sad, slow and pondering.
There's a weird serene element, especially to John. There's moments where he's just sitting there. Where before, he's just like such like frantic energy. Yeah. Like when he sits by the garden at his house, just looks and he's so still. And I'm like, damn, this like changed his code.
Yeah. And I think that's reflected in the way they did the episode. Like, it just hit me so much throughout the episode. It felt like almost a completely different show at this point. It was such a big tonal shift. The music is all different. And there's still this plot going on with Tornaga and, will he or won't he be defeated by the council. But it almost doesn't feel like it matters anymore.
We can maybe talk about this a little later when we get to what Tornaga says to Yabu at the end, but I know a lot of people were really disappointed in this end because they wanted the war.
On the big battles.
This wasn't what the show was about.
And I think this puts that squarely into focus. Like, you had, up until this point, you've had multiple things going on and sort of competing for your attention. You have John and his journey and his struggles. And on the face of it, what you're presented with first is it's about his fight with the Portuguese. And will he be able to get people on his side to fight the Portuguese. When's he going to get to his ship? When's he going to fight the black ship?
Yep.
They keep setting up these things like, oh, okay, that's where we're going. An inevitable conflict with the black ship. We're going to see a ship-on-ship fight. Okay, we're going to see Toranaga fight. We're going to see this big battle.
Master Commander, baby.
Yeah. We're going to see all this stuff like, how's he going to do that? And we have Toranaga, and how's he going to... Where's that decisive moment going to be? Where's that decisive battle?
Yes.
Where's that going to happen? But under the surface, if you've been following the character story, there's been this parallel journey of John as he struggles with his identity and his like core beliefs and how those conflict with Mariko and her culture's core beliefs and her story and what her life means and what life means in general and how death can have meaning and all these things. And when I first watched it, I wasn't sure either which one was going to be like what the show really landed on in terms of, no, this is what the show was about. But by this point, now it feels like all those other plots have just fallen away. They're still happening. Some of them are still happening, but they don't seem as important anymore. It's almost like you, the audience, are in the same days that John is in, and you're just sitting there contemplating not the fate of a nation or Catholics versus Protestants. Whew. All you're thinking about is contemplating the life of this one woman.
Because, as Toranaga said, the battle's already been fought. Crimson Sky already happened. That's why we don't see a battle, because it already happened.
So I don't want to use the cliche of subverting expectations, but in a way that is what's happening. Is they really masterfully took all this like classic TV plot progression in terms of this, war plot, and then subverted it. And like, no, this was the war all along. It was just won by this one person, not by all these armies of men. And now it's done. Now you're just left to like think about it.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong about subverting expectations.
Right.
It's just, it's been used a lot lately and as more of like a surprise. Like, that doesn't make sense. Like, oh, I'm not doing what you think I'm going to do.
I got to surprise social media because they're going to guess it, so I got to change it.
But it doesn't make sense why you would do that. I'm like, but you were going on this direction where that makes sense. And then you change courses and that doesn't make sense with the story you're telling, the character's development. Here, completely makes sense. It has to be done this way, because if it went the action more probably of a storyline, it would have been a lesser show. Yeah,
it would have been a fine show, but definitely lesser. Definitely, because it's where you expected it to go. And I think what you said about it making sense is a good point here, because I think that people who, it caught me off guard. So I'm not going to say, oh, I saw it coming. But for those who are caught off guard and still, even after reviewing it afterwards, still don't get it, I would say that they're missing that this was there all along. This didn't,
especially rewatching it.
This didn't come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And that's where a bad twist is when it comes out of nowhere.
Nowhere, exactly.
And if you've been looking, and again, I did have to, on the second rewatch, that's why it helped in the second rewatch to go through and see, oh yeah, now I can follow this journey, this under the surface journey. Because the groundwork was laid the whole time.
Yes, because those are the best twists.
Exactly.
The groundwork was laid. It was always there, but for some reason there was a veil where it's almost like you couldn't see the natural progression of something, and then it was lifted and you're like, oh shit, it was always supposed to be like this.
It reminds me of how the Japanese characters speak and talk to each other, actually, where everything is like veiled in like subtext, and there's what they're saying and then there's what they mean. And so the plot of the show is the same. They're what they're saying, which is like Portuguese Catholic, fight Toranaga versus Council. Will there be a battle? Is there going to be a Crimson Sky? And then there's the subtext, the subplot, what's really going on under the surface. Yes. And that's like Toranaga's plan in a nutshell, and not just his plan, but the plot and themes of the show.
So the storytelling in the show is also very Japanese, like
Yes.
even, and we see it as Western viewers. We're like, where's our shooty boom boom, ships go, and battle.
That's how John sees it. That's why he gets so. When you look back at it, that's why he's been so frustrated about like, what's my role in Crimson Sky? What am I supposed to be doing? He's almost like an audience member trapped in the show, going, "Where's my action plot? I'm missing my action plot beats. Where am I supposed to be? I'm supposed to be fighting someone."
Swords, come on!
And just like you watching the show, now
we're John and Yabu. We're like a little cross of both.
And now you're sitting in this final episode like him, and you're just in this sort of state of shock and contemplation and quietness. And we could talk about this forever, but this is really just the mastery of the show.
The audience, are we going the way of John, or are we going the way of Yabu? Because I feel like people are like, I didn't get my bottle. That was Yabu with Tornaga. Like, well, when you're going to get Victor, blah, blah, blah. Like, he was talking to him at the end. He's like, you still don't get it. Tornaga, like, you still don't get it.
All right, so.
Well,
let's continue.
This is going to be a 3-hour episode.
Oh, boy. So, we were. No, but this is the good stuff. This is the good stuff that I want to talk about.
That's fine. If we need to skip some stuff, it's fine.
Okay, so they're in the woods. He's talking to the priest, and he basically is just like, all right, enough of the bullshit. I know I'm going to be ambushed by bandits, quote unquote, right now. So
where
bring them out.
Are they?
Bring out the bandits. This is where I'm in my end. And what was his name? Alvito. Alvito says,
Priest.
Says, I'm not going to deny it. You were supposed to die here, but an arrangement was made to spare your life. So you're free to go. We're bringing you back to Tornaga. You will leave Osaka alive.
I'm like,
yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to take your word on that. He's like, well, you'll just have to trust me. So they bring him to the
bay,
the port. Yeah, he makes it there alive. Sees Yabu packing up his boat. John leaves and is going off to the ship, and then Alvito calls out to him, says it was Lady Maria. Mariko. She asked the church to spare your life before she died. Oh man, it's gonna be so hard to get there.
I know, because he gets on his little boat to get to the galley, and John is like on the edge,
barely holding it together,
of sobbing. He's just like,
just
gotta make it
acting
through.
Here was great. He was me in this moment. Yeah, he really starts like almost breaks down in tears.
So we get a quick little scene with Ochiba with her son, and they're finishing Mariko's poem, the one with the leafless branch that Yabu shit on. And she repeats the line she said in the last episode, that flowers are flowers because they're meant to fall. And then she adds, but thankfully, the wind.
Whew.
Which, when we get, because later in the episode, Tornaga also talks about the wind, and I think that's an important parallel.
And one thing I was reading, apparently the word they use for the wind, this is a word for spring, basically. So like new life.
Why are you telling me this? I need to get through this episode.
We're not going to get through this episode.
Oh my God.
Oh boy.
Okay, we're back. We're back on the boat. We need to get back on the boat. I can't stop. All I put was Yabu was melting.
Yeah, so they're coming up to Ajiro, and Yabu is, he's. I mean, he was still pretty far. He was far gone in Osaka, and he's still far gone now. He sees John, and he starts just getting really manic, and he's like, "Well, what's your country called? Your ship. We could go on your ship. We could take your ship home to your country. What's your country called? England. Yeah, sure. We'll go. Take me there."
Whatever. Just
and then he starts like pulling his robe off. He's like, "Teach me how to swim, like you taught Tornaga to swim. Let's learn to swim." Trying to just do something to like, I don't know, get out of the situation to make a friend. And John basically says, "Pull yourself together, man."
This is interesting. On the podcast, they mentioned that John and Yabu, they're both, like Tornaga said, the Falcons. They're kind of parallel together, and this is where they diverge.
Yes.
And so while he's looking at him going like, pull yourself together, is a moment of realization that this used to be him. He's no longer this person anymore. He's, starting to break apart from being that person. Because Yabu's still kind of there.
Mhm.
Even though he's riddled with guilt, like he's still frantic. He's still like, where John's like, he's like, I don't know who I am, but I'm not this person anymore.
Right.
And then, the 1-2 punch, poor John.
They come up to the harbor at Ajiro, and someone shouts out, and they see John's ship has been sunk. And the look on John's face, I'm like, obviously for us, we're watching this in this globally connected world, but this is a man stuck thousands of miles from home. His only way back to whatever his old life was that ship.
Honestly, I give credit for this character just not completely just jumping off the ship. Honestly,
if he was Yabu, right? If we talk about that diversion, if he was a different person, this would have been. You could still hit some hard, but definitely
yes. The look on his face.
If this had happened at the beginning of the show, it would have been very different.
Yes,
but it's still like a bit like this is the final chord. There is no going back now, because without that ship,
Mm-hmm. So he really has no ties anymore. He doesn't really quite know who he is. He knows he's not the old him. So he really is in this limbo state at the moment, where I think he's on the precipice of being this new person. I feel like he's just getting there. Like he's just on the final breakdown, in essence. After seeing that, they land, get off the boat, and Yabu is immediately arrested.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Omi's there, along with a bunch of Tornaga's men, and they ask for his swords. These men belong to Tornaga, our liege lord. Sort of leans in a little bit there. And the orders belong to him too, and you're to report to him. So Yabu, I think, knows what's up at this point.
Yeah. There's a little aside where the spy, Tornaga spy, as we know, the guy who's dressed up as a fisherman.
Who's translated for John in the past, yep. He's talking about his ship, says some enemies slipped past our guards in the middle of the night. Christians, we think.
Christians, yep.
Yeah. And they sunk the ship, And so John's like...
starting to piece together.
Christians.
Yeah.
And they go through the village, and it's like...
Ooh, chaos.
Chaos, yeah. There's heads on pikes, and there's people beating people up, and the fisherman tells them, basically, until we find whoever aided, these raiders in destroying your ship, this village will not rest. Lord Tornaga has ordered it. So things are not going well here.
Yabu is taken to Tornaga, and it is a very interesting role reversal, because in the very first episode, this is where Yabu was sitting when he met John.
Yes.
And now he's the one on his hands and knees in front of Tornaga, and just to see, from the first episode to the last episode, Yabu's journey is really, whew.
Especially going back to what you said about him looking at Yabu and being like, this is, I used to be this person. Now he's literally looking at me like, I used to be this person. I was in this position.
Because I was wondering why, when Yabu reveals that he's guilty, that pretty much John doesn't have any type of big reaction. He just is looking at him.
Yeah.
And I think it is a part of this divergent path that they're taking, and more just taking it in than having an outward burst. Because I was expecting that. I was going to be bitch, tackle Yabu, and just looks at him with
he has developed. Would you say he has developed a secret heart, right?
Yes.
Where he's able to absorb these things.
That's the first time where I feel like you really see his fence.
Yeah. I also think something else that just occurred to me too, based on the conversation he has with Tornaga later, is I also wonder if he has some measure of pity for Yabu. Partly because he sees him as who he used to be. Because when he talks to Tornaga later, he talks about, I was the disloyal one. I doubted. I had a moment where I lost faith.
Yeah.
And I part of me thinks he's looking at Yabu with the same sort of...
Because hasn't he done shitty things that have led to people's demise, like his crew? On his ship?
His crew, the gardener, I think.
Yeah.
So obviously, it doesn't make him like him, but he at least understands and has some measure of pity.
Oh, yeah, there's
for what has
definitely pity
happened
in
to
his
him.
look, yeah.
And that is sort of why it's able to sort of temper what you would expect would be that knee-jerk anger to come out. It's more just like, yeah.
But it's definitely another note on how John has changed.
Yep.
So pretty much the conversation with Toranaga is that somebody saw him, Yabu, let the intruders in, and also one of Maruko's ladies in waiting was in that dozo, the cellar, with them, and overheard Yabu saying, "Forgive me," and looking very guilty-stricken. So we came around and bit him in the ass.
Yep.
And so
she wrote a letter to Omi. And then Omi's like, I felt it was my duty to report this to our Lord. It's like, oh, I see what you're doing.
I think
you sly dog.
But I think he knows.
Yeah, he sort of had no choice.
Toranaga was going to find out in some way.
Especially if you're at all familiar with Toranaga's spy network up to this point, which has been impeccable. He seems to know everything.
He probably already knew before Omi told him.
But in some way, I don't think, even though Omi says, yeah, I was the one who reported it, I don't think Yabu holds anything against him. In some ways, he's probably proud of him and be like, yeah.
No, Yabu didn't seem upset at Omi at all.
That's the thing I would do.
So yeah, he pleads guilty. And so he is sentenced to die by sunset the next day.
Yep. And at this point, Yabu starts freaking out, no, Lord, if I'm to die, give me a good death. Like being torn apart by a cannon or eaten alive by a school of angry fish. I
don't know why the school of angry fish really
And Toranaga's like, fine suggestions, but I don't trust you. So
yeah,
they go this back and forth. He tries to bequeath his fief to Omi. He declares him as heir. But Toranaga's like, no, that's great, but these aren't yours to give out anymore. It's like, who should second you? And he's like, John? No. Okay, you. Yes. So Toranaga's going to second his death tomorrow at sunset.
We have a quick little scene with John back at his house, and there's Fuji.
Oh my god.
She comes and sits down, and just a little back and forth. Nothing major, but you can feel Maruko's absence because the way that it is shot, John's in the middle, Fuji's on one side, and then there's an empty space on John's other side. And like we said with Kiko, you feel the absence of something when it's no longer there.
Presence is felt most keenly in absence. And that's the other thing I really want to talk about, because this whole show has been about this, and this episode really drives it home. Obviously, Maruko has been there this whole time. Mm-hmm. She's been a main character. So we had a little bit of this with Nagakado, where he was always there, but he was sort of a side character.
Yep.
But after he died, he really was like the focus of everyone's attention. And it was only at that point that you felt his presence was after he was gone. Now Maruko is just like that, but tenfold.
Yep.
Everything is about Maruko. All anyone could think or talk about is either Maruko or the things she's done, her words. And John just says, no translator.
Yeah.
And I think it was great that we didn't see the funeral, so we get that sort of delayed closure, because it really makes the whole episode is like a funeral.
Yeah.
We're just, obviously characters in these shows die all the time, and you've had shocking deaths before. Mm-hmm. The most famous one recently is probably being Ned in Game of Thrones. Like, everyone expects him to live and be a main character, and then he's dead.
Yeah, I saw that in real time. Whew.
And obviously that, not to diminish that or anything, but I think these are very different, because obviously that death affects plot in many ways, but I feel like in this show, it's just really, really effectively highlights Maruko as she feels like a real person who has lived a real life, an impactful life. And to see how she affects everyone around her, not in a plot way, but in just how she's affected their lives and their own journeys, and how important she was to everyone. Like I can't remember the last time a show made me feel like this connected to a fake made up person.
Oh, yes.
And make me feel like I'm experiencing the loss of someone I've known.
Yeah.
And someone who other people have known. And just the way they were able to capture that feeling of loss was phenomenal.
And speaking of Maruko's impact, the next scene is with Toranaga reunited with his wives and his baby son.
Mm-hmm.
And first wife gives Toranaga a letter that she got from Ochiba before they left.
Secret letter.
So
he asked, have you read it? And she's just like, what a suggestion.
I'm like,
which of course means she read it. Of course she read
I'm like, this would be me. This is me in the show.
She read it. Toranaga knows she read it. Doesn't matter.
It's cute.
These two ladies are so close to him. They're basically just extensions of himself.
What a suggestion.
I really love like their whole relationship. It feels so wholesome.
And so he reads the letter and you don't know yet what it says,
right.
But the look on his face, the relief that comes across his face. You're like, well, looks positive.
Yep.
And then he starts talking about, oh no, he cites
a poem
and his
which
wife
I'm not going to read because I'm going to cry.
And his wife is like, that's a little too beautiful for you.
Yeah, those words too beautiful to belong to you. It's like burn.
And he just smiles and he goes, yeah, there.
They belong to Lady Mariko. Damn it, I'm still going to cry. Only her words remain with us now. And the poem that I talked about was ones I am going to read because it makes this line make sense. If I could use words like scattering flowers and falling leaves, what a bonfire my poems would make, which we heard last in the episode where Hiro took his life.
Mm-hmm.
And so he says, only her words remain with us now, but what a bonfire she made. Again, driving home that impact of a person, and now you're left with their words. But
man, what? Because her words fought the battle.
Mm-hmm.
And when we find out what that letter says, her words changed the course of history.
Yep. Anything else you want to say here?
There's definitely moments throughout this episode where Toranaga looks moved, maybe choked up a bit. I think this is the point where he really, because he's like kind of looking out while he's saying these words to his wives, and I don't know, he looked like it's probably the closest he came to tears.
Yeah.
Is in this moment.
So we go back to John's house, and Fuji's there, and the boxes of her son and husband's ashes are there. Oh my God, this is it.
That little box always gets to me.
Again, right from the beginning of the show, this is one of the first things that happened. Feeling presence and absence. Every time you see these boxes, they impact you more than seeing the people themselves ever did.
Yep.
Because their death has given them more meaning.
Yep.
It's, ugh. Anyway, so he asks about them. Hey, what are those? Because it's the first time he's seen them. And she talks about she tells them what they are. And she says she's not sure what to do. She's supposed to bury them in the family temple, but she wishes to be close to them still. So she's not sure what to do. Just put a pin in that. And then she tells them that she's leaving.
Going to become a nun. Going to a nunnery.
Her service to Tornaga's ended. And just like she said earlier, she's going to go become a nun. And so they're able to talk a little bit in Japanese at this point. So they sort of have a basic conversation. But
John's like, but I order you to stay.
Yeah, he asks, he says, I wish for you to stay. She says, impossible. I order it. Fuji is consort.
Saying no longer.
Yeah, my service is complete. And he says, Fuji, best nun. I just think this is so sad because now she's like his only like friend left over. Yeah. Obviously Mariko, but Yabu.
Yes.
Yabo, I would say, I think he realized he lost him on the boat.
Yes.
Where, they were
exactly.
really close. They were probably the tightest of him and anyone else besides Mariko, but now they've split. Their paths have diverged. So he's lost him. He's about to lose him physically too, but he's already sort of lost him as a contact. Mariko's gone.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, the people that he had the most to relate to were the Portuguese and the Spanish, like Rodriguez and Alvito, but obviously they're, because of the faith, they can't really interact. It'd be too dangerous. He can't go home, and so Fuji's like his last connection, and now she's going to be leaving too.
And then they end the conversation with John asks her to help him make a statement.
Well, yeah. So before then, she says that she's sad for this village. And
yes.
After what happened to your ship, the villagers are being severely punished. And he's like, yeah, you know what? I'm sad too. Like, he's starting to feel like really attached to this place and the people in it. Like, it is kind of like you would with your neighbors, like your home. And so, then he says, prepare a message for Lord Toranaga. I wish to see him tomorrow. So now we get him outside. He's going to go Toranaga. Omi comes down to escort him there.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously these two have had a real testy relationship.
It's interesting because this is also another time where Omi's asking him to give up his gun.
Yep.
And with sword and gun, like he just
gives him over right away. You could tell Omi's just like, I was expecting another fight.
Yeah.
So he's sort of taken aback. Again, another sign of how John has changed and evolved and what his priorities are now. And I think the big thing is, probably the biggest change here is just the dropping of ego.
Yes.
Like, he never wanted to give up the stuff because it was his, and but that's sort of gone now, and this is the way things have to be. So yeah, he gives up, gives his swords, no fight. He's ready to talk to Toranaga on his own terms.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so it goes up and he meets Toranaga. The fisherman is there to help translate.
Toranaga asks, the fisherman to translate, and he gives him like this whole spiel of stuff to tell him about, them finding the enemies in the village. And the fisherman turns up and he's like, there's no way I'm going to be able to translate this as a fisherman who only knows like little English. And so Tornaga's like, he hasn't guessed yet?
Yes, they haven't told me. We know, but this guy is actually one of his samurai, so he tells John,
And as he's telling John, the realization and shock on John's face, and he's like, holy crap. Because he says, like, I'm a spy and vassal of Toranaga.
And he came over here years ago, converted to Christianity specifically to spy for Toranaga in this village. So I think it's just another example of like the lengths that those who serve him will go for him. Miraji was his fisherman name.
Miraji.
And his
okay.
actual name is Tonomoto Aquino.
Okay.
Aquino. So Tonomoto will be his family name. So
okay. Aquino. So after the veil's been dropped, Toranaga says, we're going to find those who aided in sinking your ship. And John goes, he tries his best to say this next part in Japanese, but he does ask for help from the translator, like if I need it. And pretty much it just boils down to he apologizes to Toranaga for the disrespect he showed him at that meeting where he pretty much peaced out and said, bye. Because he was very, very disrespectful then. So he apologizes and he said, I had lost hope.
Yep.
And faith, pretty much. And he asks, please leave Ajiro alone.
Yep. He says, one man lost hope. Whoever aided the ship, one man lost hope, but Ajiro is loyal.
Yes.
And so, this is what I was talking about with Yabu, that sort of, he recognized that Yabu had lost hope.
Yep. That's why he kept bouncing around, because he didn't seem like he had full hope in Toranaga.
And what's interesting is Toranaga is to blame for that. He used him because he knew how, and by keeping him at an arm's length, he ensured that he would take these actions. But from Yabu's perspective, he's always in the dark. And because he didn't have, I guess you could say he never had enough faith, or trust of his own to trust Toranaga's, that Toranaga knew what was going on. But I think it's an interesting line of discussion throughout this whole series is Toranaga and how much he uses those around him to serve his own ends, even people who are close to him, even his son.
Yeah, because at the end, Yabu calls him out a little bit on it.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll go.
Yeah,
put a pin in that.
Yeah, so
he says, please leave Ajiro alone. And Toranaga's like, why do you care about Ajiro? What? Don't you want your vengeance, on your enemies?
So John says, well, my enemies didn't burn my ship. It was Mariko. She hated my war against the Catholics and made that arrangement that the priest had referred to trade his survival for the destruction of his ship. So...
And then Toranaga says...
This death, not right.
Yeah. Toranaga says, well, what about Engine's war? And John says, I don't need it. My war, small war.
And that right there is, I think, what we've been talking about with the way his viewpoint has shifted and the perspective he's gained and how much he's changed is wrapped up there.
I thought it was interesting the phrase, I don't need it.
Yes.
Was a very good script choice. I think that says a lot about John and why he was going after these things.
All the way back to even before he landed on Japan, with what his crew was talking to with in that alley. With
yes,
they didn't need to go here. It was John who pushed for them to go. They didn't know what for, but it was something that John felt he needed. Some part of his identity or his.
In the podcast, they mentioned pretty much ego and ambition. And how...
Yeah, they mention ambition in the alley, too.
And in part with colonialism. Like...
True, yeah, this sort of manifest destiny.
Exactly.
Going forth.
So...
Acquiring.
He was trying to make his own destiny and fate.
Glory, yeah.
Yeah. And it was all based in his ambition, his ego, and the idea that it is... probably his divine purpose, like we said with colonialism, like it's my right to do this.
And also with and also talking about divine right, you have Protestant and Catholic, so it's like, it's a holy purpose,
Exactly.
This is divine, yeah.
So and Toranaga's like, that's nice, but I still refuse because there's still disloyal people up in my village.
Those who are disloyal to me continue to breathe air in my domain. Which I think gives you also another little peek behind the curtain into, like, Toranaga's pretty ruthless. Very ruthless.
Oh, yes.
Especially what we find out later.
Yeah, I was about to say, when we find out later, put a pin in that too. There's a lot that happens between the Toranaga and Yabu conversation. Yeah. Ooh, that's going to take a while to dissect.
So John's like, disloyal. I was the disloyal one.
And he puts his sword down and he says this. Because and Toranaga's like, what does this guy do? He goes, and John says, I'm the disloyal one. And Toranaga's pretty much like, he really thinks he's something, that his death is not going to stop me from rooting out the disloyalty in this village.
He says, I die, not village.
I came here to use you.
Yeah, he shouts this, to use you. The day I set foot on your shores, I fed you. And he mimes it, I fed you shit.
Yeah.
Points to himself and says the Japanese word for enemy, which he learned in their first conversation from the priest.
That's right.
Where he said, I am not your enemy. I cannot imagine being your enemy. Now he's just like, no, yeah, I
am your enemy.
I am your enemy. I came here to use you.
And then we get a little bit of that flash forward. It's almost like
the audio,
Yeah, he turns his head to the side. He turns his head to the side. He looks off just for a second, and you see just a little flash of him as an old man in that bed. And then he looks back.
It's like he's seeing that life ahead of him.
He takes out the cross, Mariko's cross, and literally says, fuck it. We live and we die. He puts the cross on the end, the hilt of the sword, and as he's putting the sword up towards him, he says, I, Engine, by my death protest the callous punishment of this village, Bayoshi Tornaga.
Yeah, basically exactly mirrors what he saw Mariko do. Because he has now realized, this is like the ultimate culmination. He has now realized.
So it's not exactly seppuku, but it's close enough where he knows, like, by doing this, he's going to understand.
That's what all comes down to, is death can have meaning. And at this point, it is the only action big enough to convey what he's trying to say.
And I think this is where we are clued in that what we are seeing is not a flash forward. This is where I start, because he's looking off. It's in his mind. This is a potential future for him.
Yep.
Like, if he continues on the path of where he was going, when he started the show, that's who he would become. And by looking and seeing that future, it's like, you know what? Fuck it. I feel like that's the moment where he completely said, just gave up on that path, like that future. He just gave up on that version of himself. He let it down, and he chose the path Mariko chose. Because there's nothing selfish about trying to save this village. It's not like there's some grand plan, like if he does this, then I'll help him, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is purely because he is upset that this village is being punished, indirectly by something that has happened to him.
Mm-hmm.
And he's finally doing something meaningful that is beyond his ego. So he has the sword to his, it looks like up to his chest.
Takes some deep breaths, and he really does not look like he's bluffing at all. And he goes to plunge it in, and thank God Tornaga is quick on his feet and has a strong arm.
He might be 60, but he is quick.
Boy, did he wait until the last possible second, because I think he also really wanted to see, like, hey, is he going to do this?
Oh, I'm pretty sure he has, like, huge slash bruise on his chest.
So he jumps in, grabs his arm, puts another arm in his chest to, like, keep them separated, and knocks him over.
Like, he almost kills himself.
Yep.
It is that close. And Tornaga says, if you're done.
If you're finally done.
Go rebuild your ship. Make me a fleet.
So gives him that purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is where we then cut back to the village, and they're like taking the heads off and cleaning up, and that happens here or there. But basically, I think it's implied that yes, Tornaga stopped the suffering of the village. So he did it. He did it. He protected the village just like his gardener did.
Exactly. And
I think that was also ever present in his mind. Like, I've already caused this village enough suffering. I don't want to cause any more.
Yes. Oh, man. And then we go right into Yabu going to his death.
Yep. So he's with Omi. It says, find a good husband for my wife. Surprise, he has a wife.
I didn't know that.
Because everybody does it. Everybody has consorts at this point. It says, make sure he's not an idiot. Omi thanks him for making him his heir. Yabu says, you were the son I never had.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little sweet moment there. Then he gives him his death poem.
Do you have what he wrote for his death poem?
My death poem. My dead body. Don't burn it. Don't bury it. Just leave it in the field. And with it, fill the belly of some hungry dogs. It was this impressive, right? I think my skills have never been sharper.
Well, Jonathan, I have some sources.
Oh, it's the same sources that I have?
Where maybe we'll see, but I have an early draft of his poem, because it's your death poem. You need to rework and reshop the shit. You know what I mean? So, here's his first trial. Beats bears and boobies. The best and beautiful things of this broken life. Clap.
Wow.
You could see why he ditched that, though.
Yeah.
But the alliteration was nice.
Yep.
Wait, did you have some sources?
No, sorry. What I thought you were going to say is this is based off a real poem.
No, it is?
Yes. They don't know who the author is. It's been attributed to like a few different people, but it's like, yeah, it's adapted from a real poem.
Are you telling me Yabu's death poem he ripped?
Well, no, I think they were trying to make it so that is the implication that he actually is a secretly great poet. I don't know. So yeah, that is his death poem.
Omi cries, not because of Yabu's terrible poetry skills, but he cries because he is moved, and he says, "I've learned much from you."
And Yabu says, "And now the learning ends."
And he hands over his final will
to his little buddy there. Says, "Have a good death."
Man, the secrets that Vassal has seen, we've seen him all throughout the season. I'm like, man, I would want to know his memoir.
So now we get
Toranaga and Yabu.
Basically the last big scene, big scene of the show, Toranaga and Yabu.
Because so much happens, I couldn't write it like line from line. But they first go into the ship. And Toranaga said the ship had to be destroyed. Mic drop. It was Toranaga who destroyed Engine's ship. Because he said it was between that and the Engine's life.
Appointing a watchman to spread gunpowder wasn't that hard. Now, he does say that Marco negotiated for the church, and I agreed. So I think John was right that
half.
It was part of their deal.
Yes.
But what he didn't know is that Toranaga was in on that deal, and that he was the one who destroyed the ship, which means there was no raider, there was no enemy that snuck through the guards, there was no traitor in the village.
It was all a ruse. It was all a ruse to see what John does.
Which is pretty ruthless.
Yes. Which I'm like, man, the people that got killed in the village, were they already on his shit list, and he used this as a way to kill them?
Maybe they just weren't important.
Ooh.
We definitely, it's interesting, because obviously you've been rooting for Toranaga this whole time.
But he does some stuff, man. It's rough.
Yeah. He's not necessarily a good person. He's a
complicated historic
figure. Very much so. Because this whole goal, and he tells Yabu this, like, my vision, which will start in Edo, which is Tokyo, of a nation without war. And that's a very noble goal, right? And it is very important in Japanese history. But also, he gets this world no war by becoming the ruler of Japan. So it's like, yes, there is no war when you have destroyed all your enemies and have conquered everything.
Before we leave his talk about John, he does say that he doesn't think it is John's fate to leave Japan.
Mm-hmm.
That likely, after he rebuilds his boat, he'll probably have to destroy it again. Hopefully he has learned his lesson, though, by then. And he goes, I may tell him one day.
Yep. At this point, Yabu asks him, how does it feel to shape the wind to your will? And Toranaga says, I don't control the wind, I only study it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which is basically, that's Toranaga in a nutshell. And now we get more of the explanation, because Yabu's still confused. Like, how can you win this? Is it Crimson Sky? Is that it? And
Crimson Sky already happened.
Yep. I could never have sent an army to Osaka, so I sent a woman to do what an army never could.
And honestly, it sounds like her death saved so many people, because there would have been war at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess you can tank this onto one of Toronto's noble qualities, too, is that he did do this without mass bloodshed. Like, he was always very determined to avoid an all-out war, which is commendable.
Mm-hmm.
Because because he now lays out the future. This is the big cock tease of the battle we never see because it doesn't happen.
But it is interesting because what happens is like, oh yeah, like that would have been boring if it was actually like in an episode. Yeah. So go ahead with what happens.
So basically it says, in a few months we'll meet their army on this specific field. He already knows the field, so I guess maybe that's more of him studying the wind. Oh, apparently a lot of these battle locations were actually decided on collectively. Like they would agree on where to fight. Which I also think is interesting.
Gosh.
Very honorable. It's like,
but the discussions that probably went into that. We saw those regent council things.
Right.
Oh, Jesus.
So yeah, we're going to fight here. All of these 5 armies will converge. And yeah, if the council was united, I'd be screwed.
Fucked. Yeah.
Ochiba sent me a note. Now we get to reveal what was in the note. Because of Mariko's actions, she has grown tired of her alliance with the Shido, and she promised that she would withhold the heir's army from the battlefield, which, what they're talking about in the council meeting, without the heir's support, they have no, legal standing.
Exactly.
And without the heir's support, the council will crumble, Ashido's support will crumble, and they will flip on him before a single sword is drawn.
And I just like how, because as Toranaga's explained this, you're kind of seeing what the future holds. And just the fact that Ashido's on the battlefield looking so confident, and then there's no cut.
In the armor he's been looking at all season, being like, I wish I was a samurai again. I finally get to fight. And he's about to, and he gets delivered this note. Which presumably from Chiba would be like, yeah, we're not coming. And all of his homes get dashed to pieces. And he wears the stank face forever.
It's just permanently on his face now. And so, yeah, the regents are no longer for this. So because of this, he would be forced to pretty much broker a deal or peace with Toranaga.
Yep. And yeah, so basically, the battle is that there is none. Ishido was so outmaneuvered that Toranaga wins it all without a single drop of blood. Well, single drop of blood on the battlefield.
Yeah.
Plenty of blood elsewhere, but not there.
Which is interesting because, who'd want... I'm glad they did it this way. Who'd want to see an episode with just people hanging out on the battlefield, fight, we're not going to go to war now. I think
that probably would have been more...
It'd been way more
I think another show would have done it that way.
Yeah, it just... I think this was a smart way to do an anticlimactic war.
Because they've already revealed the true focus of the show, which means you're already on board on that. By the time you get to this, you're like, oh, yeah, this plot. Just like John, it's almost not important to you anymore because you're so invested in what the real story is. And therefore, you're able to take, if you were someone who was looking forward to a battle, this lets you down much easier rather than trying to trick you and to psych you up into thinking this is it, finally the battle, and only then to flip it on you. That would have probably been that would have been harder to take if you were really hoping for some fighting.
And this is where he goes into his dream of a nation without wars and kind of ushering an era of peace, which the real life version of this character did, the Edo period, which because up until this point, there's been so many civil wars and disputes, a lot.
Sounds when you're all trapped on an island together.
Exactly. And so just a lot of chaos. And he's known for ushering this era of peace, which they were then able to flourish economically because of the stability.
Yep. And he mentions how all of us have made this possible. You, Yabu, me, Mariko, of course, even the barbarian who came out of the sea. He says, how many times I thought of giving his life away, but stopped. Not because he's important. My banner would have survived without him. But because he makes me laugh. And my enemies need a distraction.
Don't put down the power of making somebody laugh. And I think that's also why he kept Yabu around for as long as he did. I think the same thing. I think personally, he finds something about Yabu amusing and charming. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why Yabu lasted for as long as he did, but he just did something where even Tornaga couldn't bring him back from.
And he doesn't need him anymore.
Yeah.
That's the other thing, is once you're not needed, you are discarded.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this is where Yabu kind of jabs in a little bit and calls him out.
Oh, yeah, he's like, it's hypocrisy.
All this death and sacrifice from lesser men just to ensure some victory in our names. It's like, I mean, yeah, that's true. Tornaga is not the Ned Stark. Obviously, because this one kept his head.
Yeah.
Maybe if Ned Stark was more like Tornaga, he'd still be alive.
I think Tornaga is a realist. And I think sometimes that makes him ruthless because he really does want this air of peace. Like, he genuinely wants this. I do believe that. And then Yabu mentions in this, you want to be Shōgun.
Yeah, because Tornaga asks him, do you remember what the engine said on the day we met when I told him this fight was pointless?
Mm-hmm.
This is when the scene with the drawing the map. And Yabu was like, yeah, he said, unless I win. Great line. So, and Tornaga says, if you win, anything is possible. Like, okay, what? Duh. So, yeah. And so, yeah, that when if you win, anything is possible, to which Yabu says, even Shōgun? Like, that's what you've always wanted, isn't it? You're no better than us in your secret heart. Tell me the truth.
Yeah.
I'll take it to my grave. He wants an answer to that question, because Tornaga's always been like, oh, I don't want to be Shōgun. I don't want to be Shōgun. Nagato was like, take on the mantle, Daddy, be Shōgun.
Interesting.
I don't want it.
The actor who plays Tornaga, they asked him about this. And he goes, I honestly believe that's not what he sought to be, but because he is ushering this new era in, and he needs a position, a title for this new position that he is in. You know, kind of like how I was an actor, but I'm doing now more on set, and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. He's like, at some point,
I didn't want to be a producer, but sometimes you gotta get things done.
Exactly. He's like, so I am now in a new position where I'm a producer. You know, I'm more than an actor. And he's like, that's kind of how I felt Tornaga saw it, as like, yeah, he's not gonna like deny it, but it's not something like that wasn't the ultimate goal. He really does think like the era that he wanted is his ultimate goal. And I guess I'll be Shōgun because that's the position I need to have this era, you know?
It's a very fine line.
I thought that was an interesting perspective.
And you don't get a firm answer on it. Obviously, Yabu's in the, he just, because Yabu thinks the way Yabu thinks, of course he just wanted to be Shōgun all the time. Yeah, I think any one of these could be the truth. You never know. You're not going to find out because it's his secret heart, and he's not telling anybody.
Exactly.
Not even Yabu, because he denies his request to tell a dying man his secret heart.
Why tell a dead man the future?
Which is the exact line that Yabu said to Omi when, in episode like 1 or 2, when the barbarian landed and they were talking about whether to tell him, about the ship. And Yabu says, why tell a dead man the future? So there's a question here of,
how much has Omi been telling?
Which is why I've been saying this whole time, like, keep an eye on Omi, because he really seems to be in Tornaga's favor, and he does give his uncle some advice every once in a while about, how to do his own scheming, but he tells Tornaga a lot. He's the one who rats out Yabu with the letter, like, and if this line in universe is truly meant to be Tornaga's quoting him to it, to put it back in his face, like, I've always known, this is the extent of my power, then that's the only option.
Yep.
Either that, or it's just meant to be, a literary, device.
It could be.
To mirror the beginning of the episode. But again, it's one of those Tornaga things where he's just that good that you are always left guessing. What does he know? What does he guess? What does he control versus what does he take advantage of? The Tornaga paradox.
It's just funny, especially after he literally told him what he thinks the future is going to hold.
Yeah.
To be like, well, why tell dumb men in the future?
So at that point, Yabu, in true Yabu fashion, no like ceremony and slow motion, he just takes that dagger and plunges it straight into his gut. And then he turns around and looks at Tornaga straight in the eye with like this shit-eating grin. This really like mischievous grin. Like I thought that was very Yabu, just like look death straight in the face. Because he's been obsessed with this whole time, so
yes.
Thought that was a nice Yabu touch.
Yeah, he probably wanted some kind of touch since he couldn't be eaten by a school of angry fish.
Yep, didn't get his fish. And then off goes his head.
Yabu did. Sip.
Two final little scenes. So first we get to bring the mood back down again.
Oh.
Get John and Fuji.
This is where
he brings her to the beach where he has a little rowboat and he has the ashes boxes in it. And so she's like, what's going on? He's like, do this one last thing for me. Come with me and I'll explain.
Mm-hmm.
So they row out to the lake and basically, because she was talking about she didn't know what to do with these ashes, whether to bury them, but she wanted to be close to them. And so he basically talks to her about how, as a sailor, I've always been of the mind that a soul committed to the deep is a soul who in some way lives on forever within it. And so he gestures her and says, together, points to the ocean, together, forever. And they take the ashes and together they pour them into the lake, into the sea. It's just such a great closure for her arc from when we first saw her holding her son to now.
Because John takes out Mariko's cross and Fuji places her hands over his and says, let your hands be the last to hold her. And then they drop the cross into the sea, which is what Mariko said to her when she had her baby with her. Let her arms be the last one to hold her baby. Again, mirroring from the first episode Mariko's words. And also shows that vision we saw of him was older. It's not going to come to pass because he has Mariko's cross in that vision.
Exactly.
So this is truly, it's been in his mind. So this has been not an old man looking back. This is then John as a young man looking at a potential future. And now...
a future he will never have.
Nope.
Because he never leaves Japan.
Nope. And because the real life counterpart never left Japan.
Mm-hmm.
He stayed there. I was telling you before, I got through both episodes. Okay, I'm doing good. Like I felt a lot of emotion. Oh, for some reason, I forgot she'd said that line to him. So when she said that line, I was like, okay, and nope, not getting through this episode without crying. I was done for. So now they're all together forever.
So now we move on to our final scene. At the beach, they have the village together with a bunch of big heavy ropes, and they're trying to pull his ship out of the water so that he can rebuild it for Tornaga. And so you just get them, they're pull, and they're pulling the ship up, and they're all working together.
You get a little bit of John's personality back and screaming, pull, and then cursing them out. And the translator is about to translate that. He's like, oh, let's keep that between us.
So yeah, you can see he's still a changed person, but you can start to see a little bit of that, just a little bit of life returning after the lake scene. Not the lake. Like, in real life, it was a lake. In the show, it's the sea. But
yeah, I
keep forgetting that. But that was like he finally got this closure there.
Yes.
So now, like life goes on. Mm-hmm. So he's a little bit more animated now, but still.
It's not frantic.
Yeah.
Like it's like the uppity, extroverted.
It's a good energy.
Yeah.
It's a good energy.
But it's not like like chaos.
I think it's like the start of like healing. You know what I mean? And so they stop for a bit, and then who shows up but Buntaro?
This shocked me the first time I watched it.
Yeah.
And he just comes, gives his swords to his vassal. And helps.
Joins the rope.
Helps pull the ship out of the water. And you can tell John's a little bit like, oh God, where's this going? And then when he goes, he just like, he gets a smile on his face. He's like, yeah, let's do this. Like, let's get the ship out. And it's interesting how like all that animosity towards each other just kind of
the egos.
Exactly.
Because before, whenever they talked, there was so much
there's
ego in the way of both of them.
Dick measuring contest,
through
always.
Through both of their experiences, through John and his journey.
True, because the last time we saw Buntaro was when Mariko pretty much dressed him down and said,
"Yeah,
I'd rather live 1,000 years."
Yeah, Buntaro's complete dismantling and someone broken down to literally their core.
Oh, and he seconded his father. Like, literally, those are the last two things we see of Buntaro. So he also looks a bit gaunt.
Yeah, he looks a bit rough, but
he's been through it.
He's been through it, and it's been well deserved and much needed.
And he looks like he also has chosen to go a better path, which was what we were hoping for when we saw, with him and Mariko. Like, you guys aren't meant to be together, but I was still hoping that he would pick a better path.
Yeah.
And I think here we see the seeds of him, like, starting towards that.
Again, another life that Mariko has affected. The last one you see. Even people who do not deserve it, Mariko is given a second chance.
Yep. And you see Toranaga watching from the cliffs as they're pulling the boats out, and they I don't think they pull it all the way out, but they get it pretty much to the shore.
Yeah,
they get it
that it's closer. And John just looks at him and gives him an.
But there's a couple other things that happen. Like John gives Buntaro some water. Like, he gives him some water. The translator, because the translator also gives him water, and he says thank you, and he's telling all the villagers good work, good work. And so, even though he lost a lot of key people, I think by putting his life on the line for the village, he is now attached to these people.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the boat gives him purpose, but honestly, I think it's more being a part of this community and doing this together. That's what I'm hoping, is that is his purpose now. Being a part of this village, that he feels some attachment to this village, because he seems like genuinely like excited, and he's telling like, thank you so much, doing a good job. Like, this is so different from the man who came on the shore of Japan, calling them all savages and being so awful and rude to them. And now he actually wants to be a part of this village.
Yep.
So then John sees Toranaga on the cliff.
Sort of gives him a knowing look. That's as best as I can describe that. Yeah,
because they both are looking at each other, and you can tell John is thinking something. And a little smile comes on his face, and he just goes, And a part of me is like, what was going on in his mind? Ugh. Because I feel like some kind of nugget was like revealed. Like something came to him. And then Toranaga just turns away from the audience. You see his back. He's looking out into the water and the cliffs. And
to the dawn.
To the
sunrise.
And you hear the credits music start, and it's swelling up. And then it cuts to the title, Shōgun.
And that's the end of the show.
That's it.
All right. Oh, this has been a journey.
I do want to say before we end, I think one of the things that kept people from watching this the first time around, and also I was concerned too, was this going to be English man goes native, kind of. And in the podcast, they're talking about like the reason why that has become a trope, and it kind of seems hokey to us, is it's not really earned when they become like quote unquote native. It's just like, oh, I'm like you now.
Like they're vacationing.
Exactly. We're here. The work was put in, and he doesn't do things to be like, I'm trying to like fit into your culture. Like he's not trying to force himself in.
Most of the time he's actively trying to get out.
But in this last episode, he's doing things to try to reach out to them, knowing that they'll realize the meaning behind this. And that is where he is slowly becoming a part of their community, because he's slowly understanding the meaning behind these gestures, like with pretty much offering to kill himself for the village.
Mm-hmm.
Like in a lesser show or movie, I feel like that would have been handled poorly. And here, it's built upon a journey of understanding, not of like, oh, aren't the Japanese just wonderful people? And I love them so much. I just want to be a part of your culture.
Right.
Like the
Sort of infantilizing.
Oh, exactly. Especially, oh man, Native American movies can get like that, and it's just like, ooh.
And his seppuku scene was actually that was a big change from the book. In the book, he does that much earlier.
Oh.
Which you can see in the show. It would have definitely felt unearned if it was earlier.
Yes.
But by doing it at the end, so it wasn't just some empty gesture of him trying to cosplay. It was when you were convinced that he had actually learned something.
Yes.
So this was coming not from a place of mimicking, but of he truly realized the value and the purpose it can serve for the right cause and applied it. That made it much more effective. That's one thing that I think most of the discussion I saw from the book people, who are usually terrible, miserable people, sorry, come at me, no offense, just kidding, agreed was like actually a good change. It was very effective being placed where it was in the show.
Speaking of the book, I'll leave with one thing before we end our journey. So the daughter of the author of Shōgun is an executive producer on the show. And on the podcast, like, she loves the show. Loves it. And she's like, yes, my father did a ton of research before he wrote it. But his aim was to entertain, to put together an epic,
Right.
Where I'm glad FX focused on the accuracy of the air. She's like, it did change some things, but all the changes were for the better. They were purposeful, which I was glad to hear, because sometimes with family members are like,
oh, right.
You ruined my father's legacy,
Oh, and that's impossible because Reddit says that it's a terrible adaptation. I always trust book readers on Reddit.
So she was talking about watching this last episode. And the scene with Fuji and John, where they're pouring out the ashes, and she goes, where they filmed that is a bay. I grew up in that bay. I played in that bay. And when my father passed away, the author, 40 years ago, that's where me and my family poured his ashes, is into that bay.
Oh, wow.
So to see, that's where they chose to film it. This is where they're having their closure. She goes, apparently her and her whole family were watching this. They didn't know that this was filmed here and about the scene. They're like, not a dry eye. Our whole family was crying, and could tell how much the show meant to her and how much she believed this show would have meant to her father. And I'm really glad. Sometimes family members can do more damage to trying to, because they're more concerned about their family's legacy than the actual show or movie. I was really glad to hear that. I was really glad to hear that the family really loved this.
Yeah.
And that they also got closure in a way. I don't know. Just overall, talked a lot about the meaning of things.
Yeah.
And I think that really came home to me, like, the meaning in this and the beauty in this. Because it's a beautiful show. And I don't know what the future holds. They're talking about a season 2. And you know what? It's okay. Even if, whether it's great or it absolutely tanks, I have this season of a perfect television show.
Exactly.
And no matter what comes after it, it does not take away from this television series. And I wish we would go back to doing TV this way, because like with Game of Thrones, like, yeah, there's good stuff in there, but because they're so focused on like 8 seasons, like everything's going to make sense and come together. It's like, yeah, there's some good episodes, but I don't feel the need to rewatch it because I know there's nothing is going to be satisfactory. Like, it's not going to have any type of closure ending that's satisfactory. Right. Where this, even if the rest of the seasons are absolute garbage, I have this perfect season.
Exactly.
And that's how I feel about Squid Games, which hint, hint, might be coming up.
Is that a segue I see riding past us?
Where season 1, awesome. This season 2 is coming up, and I'm like, I'm going to go in with an open book, but if season 2 tanks, season 1 was perfect. It's good. It doesn't ruin it. Nothing after this is going to ruin this season of television for me. And I wish showrunners had more of this in mind, where, yes, you can plan for the future, but you still want to give a season that is a complete whole in itself. So if something happens, you get canceled, whatever, you still have this season.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Anything else?
No, I think we pretty much covered it, especially a lot of my big thoughts we covered early on.
Yeah.
We just couldn't wait to get to them. So, yeah. Go back and listen to it again if you want to catch those. Those gems.
God, this is going to be a long episode.
It is.
It's going to be a lot to edit.
It was worth it. It really it was a big episode and really just distills the whole essence of the show down to this one episode. And yeah, talk about closure. Yeah, if you've ever been worried about watching a show, like, well, is it going to be worth it? It's going to have closure. This has closure. Very much worth it. Go watch it if you haven't yet. Go rewatch it if you have.
Mm-hmm.
You won't regret it.
Yes, please do. All right. So for next week, we have a little Halloween special coming up where I take Jonathan into the world of Giallo.
Giallo.
With Deep Red by Dario Argento.
Yeah, I don't watch many horror movies, and we kept trying to figure out something to watch that I had seen, and I realized I just haven't seen anything. So I'm just like, all right, honey, you just gotta pick something for me. So we're gonna see how I react to it.
All right, well, bye.
Bye.